Hello, and welcome to the Sangamon Experience Community Trailblazers. My name is Ann Mosley, and I am the Director and Curator of the Sangamon Experience at UIS. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the Sangamon Experience, the Sangamon Experience is an open museum space that is on the campus of the University of Illinois at Springfield. We provide a broad perspective on the history of the Sangamon region through the presentation of a wide variety of exhibitions and activities developed for and from multiple communities. These activities include projects developed from oral histories, archives, images, and other resources to encourage participants to effectively create their own sense of local history. What's so important about this is we're able to provide diverse stories of individuals who lived here in the central Illinois region. And we cover more counties than just Sangamon, but we tend to focus on Sangamon quite a bit because at one point it did cover a bulk of central Illinois and a lot of the counties that we'll eventually get to. Now, today, I'm going to be sharing with you a series of stories about female athletes from Central Illinois. And a lot of what I'll be discussing is actually really, really cool because the Sangamon Link has published a few articles relating to athletes here in Central Illinois. And a few of those articles have just been published within the last few months. And so I want to highlight some of them, but also some of the research that I was able to do on top of reading those articles and some interesting things I found along the way. So, as we go through the program, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. But I'm going to get started here and start pretty early. We're going to be in my old neck of the woods, which is the 19th century. So we are celebrating Women's History Month this month, and we've been traveling through, discovering the different lives of some amazing women throughout Central Illinois history. Sadly, last week we missed our political women, but we'll be getting back to them because there is a strong group of political women who have come from Central Illinois. So as we go through Women's History Month, you'll probably see them pop up in our social media feeds. Before that, we talked quite a bit about mothers' pensions and the fight for the care and prosperity of the children that women here in Illinois took care of, and how that became national and how that started the welfare movement throughout the United States. So if you haven't seen that episode, feel free to go back to our YouTube page and Facebook page and you'll be able to see it. So today, I will be discussing women's sports and female athletes here in Central Illinois. And I kind of took a play off of A League of Their Own. And I called the episode that we're talking about today A Game of Their Own. The reason why I chose that was because we're going to be talking about a variety of different sports, not just baseball, even though baseball is going to be a huge chunk of what I'll be talking about today. So I'm going to make the screen a little bigger because last time when I did the program, the screen wasn't big enough for you to see everything. So I want to make sure that you're able to see it all. So if you have any questions, again, make sure to put them in the chat, and I'd be more than happy to try to answer them for you. I also am going to have a list of all my sources at the end of the program, so that way if you want to do your own research, you're more than welcome to do that. And as we go along, if you have any questions, I'll be able to pull those up as well. So, A Game of Their Own. The first sport we're going to talk about today is women's golf. So early in Sangamon County's history, we had a few golf courses that were started up. And I was able to look first at Sangamon Link, of course, to do a little bit of research on women's golf within Springfield area. And the first quote that is placed on the Sangamon Link article is a crowd of young society women in 1899 shocked the conventions of the day by reckless indulgence in a game called golf. Hmm. I don't know about you, but in watching golf on television or even just reading about golf, I have to firmly admit I'm not really um, a person who will watch golf regularly. My grandparents watched a lot of it. I enjoy playing golf. I'm not very good at it, but I would rather play croquet, which was more common for women at this time. Um, but in 1899, people were shocked. For some reason, were shocked that women could play golf and that it was very scandalous for them to do so. And in looking at the attire, and as you can see in some of the pictures here, women wore long dresses. They wore long sleeves. A lot of it was not form fitting. And so when you try to think of the stance for when you go to, use your club to hit the ball, a lot of times your clothing would get in the way. So I could see it being kind of a hassle or an obstacle to overcome in the midst of this amazing game. Um, in a lot of the articles that were written when the State Journal was recording the first instance of women playing golf, um, there was no evidence of it being reckless. And there were women in the Springfield area from some of the earlier beginnings. Um, the main feature of Dedication Day on June 22nd, 1899, for the Springfield Golf Club's new clubhouse was a mixed foursome tournament between two men and two women. Um, Now, the first clubhouse was built at the Springfield Golf Club, which was a 9-hole course in the 700 block of West Lawrence Avenue. The site today is the Passfield Golf Course. You can still visit the Passfield Golf Course today, and you're still able to hit a few holes. Um, and although it was um, some of the earliest Springfield female golfers were society women. Um, but the men of the era were also very prominent, and they were the ones who played more frequently than the women did. But there were a small group of women who did participate. Now, according to um, an interview that was done with the winner of the 1899 tournament was Mary Lewis. She ended up stating, quote, "The girls took a streetcar to the links except Alice Bunn, who drove a little buckboard, and a few others who appropriated the family buggies. Um, they either went home to lunch or took their own, as the club at the time did not accommodate their appetites." Part of the costume of the woman golfer consisted of a rubber band about the waist and making a shot. This band was pulled down to keep the skirts from blowing. Never having known comfort in dress, they did not seem to mind the tightly laced waists. Long, dragging skirts and high necked shirtwaists. Many wore tucked in midday blouses. Unlike today, the oldest and the most worn clothes in the wardrobe were finished off on the links. Clubs used were almost identical to those of the present day, with the exception of a new mid iron. Miss Sally Perkins still finds her 1899 set to be as satisfactory as ever. Tournaments for women were usually followed by large and enthusiastic galleries of men. After the first tournament, Miss Lewis, flushed with victory, was presented with a silver powder box by the president of the club, Nicholas Roberts. Miss Lewis has won a dozen or more cups in golf competitions. One of the most interesting has 3 handles made of goat's horns. Interesting, because we see the cups today, and those are usually silver or gold cups. And back then, they had some very interesting materials they used to make the awards. Now, around 22 women, almost all of them socially prominent, the Matheny, Buns, and Isle families were among those represented that played in the 1899 contest, featured in the centennial edition of the History of Sangamon County. Now, the Springfield Golf Club um, had a handful of golf enthusiasts laid out Springfield's first golf course um, at the Illinois State Fairgrounds in 1897. According to a 1929 article by longtime Illinois State Journal sports editor Bob Drysdale, the course was a six-hole affair resembling the present well-kept links as closely as a 1901 gas buggy resembles a luxurious sedan of today. And the bell was of gutta percha. The sound of its departure from the tee reminded one of a band of infantry at work upon the target range. So these two golf courses that were put in place were widely used. And the Illini Country Club eventually formed their own range in 1906 to 1907. And then other facilities south of Washington Park. Eventually, there were different clubs that came in and out, and the Springfield Park District now takes over a lot of the different courses that we still have around today. Now, when we study the women's golf scene, it's interesting to see the different courses that made up the entertainment circles of women's athletics here in Central Illinois because they were very limited in what they were able to participate in. But different clubs such as the Springfield Golf Club and the Illini Club allowed women to have a few athletic pursuits that they normally wouldn't get somewhere else. And it also highlighted golf as a high society type activity. Now, to encourage more athleticism and breaking barriers for women in athletic events, we turn to the YWCA. Now, some of you may be familiar, if you're from the Springfield area, of the old building that used to take place over across from the governor's mansion. And the YWCA is no longer in existence in building form, and it was demolished back in, I want to say like a few years ago. Today, the lot is being used as a entertainment center, so it's just a blank block that we've been able to listen to a lot of live music in the summer, and it's been an enjoyable green space for us. But there have been some wonderful memories of the association. Now, the Young Women's Christian Association built the building in around the early 1909. Sunday had called out Springfield on its lack of attention to women's organizations. Now, the Billy Sunday revivals, that is just an interesting topic in general that I'll be happy to get to at a later date. But the revivals ended up sparking a lot of interest in religion, but also in women and race relations as well. And he specifically calls out Springfield in not highlighting women's organizations. Now, if you look today, there are long listings of different female organizations throughout Central Illinois. And it's been interesting to see what he ends up saying. So within his speech that he gives in the midst of this long revival, he is quoted saying this, quote, "You great big bunch of sneaking white-livered boobs, letting your women folks run about the streets at night and eat their noonday lunches up some side alley. My God, if there was a man in this town with a spark of decency in him, this city would have a Young Women's Christian Association. So, what does Springfield end up doing? They end up building a Young Women's Association building. So, ignoring Sunday's now suggestion, the men were finding it as a necessity to form a women's group in response to the overwhelming reaction to what Billy Sunday had to say. There was a mass meeting that was held on April 13th, 1900. Women signed up for a YWCA membership. It was $1 a piece, and 21 women took out $100 life membership for the YWCA. The Illinois State Register sized up the reaction in 1918. Quote, Springfield had never started anything that was half so popular. The Young Women's Christian Association paid for itself from the start and is now one of the most prosperous institutions in Springfield, unquote. The organization found a temporary home on East Adams Street in a building once occupied by the defunct Springfield Evening News. But the Register wrote, quote, from the very beginning, girls and women clamored for membership, and when the cafeteria was opened, both men and women came by the hundreds for their noonday lunches. So rapid was the growth that the capacity of the small building was soon overtaxed, and plans were immediately put underway for the erection of a building, unquote. In 1910, the YWCA hired May Bambridge from Toronto, Canada, as its general secretary to help raise funds for a larger building. And she was able to generate a large attention to the YWCA, the importance of a building and a meeting place for young women within Springfield, Illinois. The new building was built June 29th, 1912. The cornerstone was put in place. The lot was on 5th and Jackson, which is where the empty lot is today. And it was designed by George Hemmel. Now, the entire cost of the building was over $24,000 for the lot, and then $76,000 for construction, and $8,000 for furnishings. And all of it has already been pledged, allowing the YWCA to move into the building with no debt. Now, 5 years later, the Register ended up stating that this was a huge success, and that the work and recreation helped add to the quality of life for women within the Springfield area. Now, May Brambridge resigned as the secretary in 1921, and she returned to Toronto. But a fire badly damaged the basement of the first floor of the building in May of 1949, and they ended up remodeling and reopening the following year after the fire happened. New fireproofing was put in place, new heating, plumbing, lighting, and the main entrance was moved as well. Now, the YWCA remained a solid organization within Springfield, offering women's programs for several decades. The group had more than 3,000 members, and at the 50th anniversary in 1963. However, membership started to decline, and due to maintenance costs and the lack in membership, they ended up closing the building in 2007 and selling it. Now, there have been many attempts to repurpose the building over many years, but the Springfield City Council took steps in early 2016 to demolish the building. And that's why the building is no longer standing today. The remaining programs, though, have been have been absorbed into the Springfield Urban League, which is still around today, and that ended up starting in 2009, and that takes up the century after Billy Sunday's big preaching announcement that there needed to be a young women's Christian association here in Springfield, Illinois. Um, and it's so fascinating to see the history of that building because it lasted up until the 1960s. That it was still used as the YWCA. And so there are still people around who may have some memories from going to that building. And if you do, I highly recommend that you place them in the comments because we'd be more than happy to learn more about it, especially the layout of the building, what was on each floor. Those are some things that provide a lot of insight and give us the imagination to imagine what the building was like during different eras that it was being used. And in addition to that, the Urban League provides a lot of the programs that the YWCA offered. And it's interesting to see the legacy of the YWCA and how it is being expanded as the years go on. Um, but it's definitely a building that is fondly remembered by individuals here in the community. We were really sad to see it go, but it's great to see that lot of land is being used for some great activities that the community can have together, which is the LRS concert series that happens every year, in addition to all the many other programs that the city is able to enjoy by using the lot of land. Now, speaking of lots, um, growing up, there have been a lot of wonderful memories of playing outside and playing in our wonderful parks that we have here in Central Illinois. But not all sports were available to women um, during the turn of the century. And one of those is an all American sport, um, which goes by the name of baseball. So, there has been a recent article that was put out by Sangamon Link about the Springfield Sallies. I was personally really excited to see this because I love the film A League of Their Own. Wonderful, wonderful movie. Um, and I was kind of sad when the movie came out that I didn't hear anything about any Springfield teams or any local teams here from the Central Illinois area. So to hear about the Springfield Sallies was really exciting to hear about. And so I was able to dive into a little bit of their history, and I was able to discover more on the All American Girls Professional Baseball League website. It is a gold mine. You can read about the players, you can read about the league's history, but also you can get a glimpse at all the different teams that made up the All American Girls Baseball League. But in addition to that, you'll get a chance to see that it wasn't just Midwestern girls that ended up participating in the league, but there were women from all over the United States and even some from Cuba and South America. And so it was really interesting to see the development of the league and what made it unique, but also the amazing experiences that these women had. So, to get us kind of broken into the Sallies, first we have to learn a little bit about just the All American League. To kind of break it down for you, I was able to discover quite a bit on the history of the league itself, and then we'll dive into the history of the Sallies. So, imagine, if you will, visitors to the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York. You're visiting, you see a bunch of older ladies walking in. You're kind of wondering, well, why are they here? This seems like a tour group. Is it a tour group of senior citizens? It's also 1988. And these older women are walking around the place as if they owned it, which, in a manner of speaking, they did. Once these senior citizens were the glamorous girls of summer, stars of the only professional female baseball league this country ever had, playing for teams with such unabashed sexist names as the Chicks, the Peaches, and the Lassies. They swung for the fences, barreled down base paths with signed autographs for their adoring fans, just like the big league ball players. But they weren't merely shadows of their male counterparts. They added dash and excitement to the national pastime, and in so doing, made it uniquely their own. Sports writers dubbed them the Queens of Swat and the Belles of the Ball Game. They called each other Mo and Tibby, Nicky, Pepper, Jeep, and Flash. They rode stuffy buses from city to city, played 6 games a week and doubleheaders on Sunday, and dreaded the day in September when the grueling season would come to an end. Now aging in body, but ageless in spirit, they were in town to attend the unveiling of a new permanent exhibit in their honor. So Ken Sells, who was the first president of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, he was 83 years old when the exhibit opened, and he was a retiree from Arizona. He was not far from where many Major League Baseball teams staged their spring training. Now, he ended up doing an interview in the midst of the opening of this grand exhibit in New York. He ended up stating, quote, "These women proved that they didn't have to sacrifice their femininity to be standouts in what was then a man's world." In May 1943, more than 100 of the best female softball players in North America registered at the Belmont Hotel in Chicago, and then assembled for tryouts and spring training at the Cubs Wrigley Field here in Illinois. Most of them were underage, overawed, homesick, and as green as the outfield grass. Jane, who was also known as Jeep, presently a resident of Phoenix, went to Chicago as a recent high school graduate from rural Pennsylvania. Quote, "I had never ridden on a train," unquote. "I sat up all night in a Pullman car because I didn't understand how the seat was going to be my bed." Sophie Curries was 17 when she showed up in Chicago, a taciturn Polish Ukrainian from Flint, Michigan. "It was raining when I got there. I told them I wanted to turn around and go right back home. They moved me in with some older girls and probably told them to mother me a bit. The next day, the sun was shining and I felt fine." Girls. It was always girls, never women, and in their recollections, it remains so today. The players soon found that they were in for more than they had bargained for. After getting up at dawn and working out all day, they were required to attend charm school in the evening. The classes were conducted by representatives of the Helena Rubinstein Cosmetics Company, who taught the athletes how to put on makeup, get in and out of a car, and put on a coat with seemingly grace. Now, the girls also learned how to enunciate correctly, how to charm a date, how to look at him and say, "Oh my, what nice eyes you have." To avoid getting dirt under their fingernails when sliding on the base paths, they were told to scratch a bar of soap before the game. Charm school fit right in with the league's so-called femininity concept. It produced a lot of good publicity, but it was also a big pain in the neck, or knee, or calf. Quote, "It wasn't easy to walk around in high heels with a book on your head when you had a Charlie horse," unquote, remembers Levon, also went by Pepper Davis, who played shortstop and catcher for 3 teams. And she, at the time of her interview, was enjoying her retirement in California. At the end of the first training camp, Wrigley's 4 managers selected the 60 best players and divided them up as equally as possible into 4 teams. Then it was time to play ball. The players were paid between $65 and $125 a week. The 108 game split season lasted for 3 months, with the winner of the first half playing the winner of the second half in a championship series at the end. The Sallies made up one of the many teams that played in this All-American uh, girls professional baseball league that was started here in Illinois. Now, to get to the Sallies, as I stated earlier, um, around 1943 is when the Professional Baseball League for Women ended up starting. Now, the Sallies did not come into the picture until around 1948. And that's partially because of the teams that were based out of Peoria and also the team that was based out of Chicago. Most of the women went to those two locations. But eventually, Springfield was picked to form a team. Now, in 1948, Springfield, Illinois was added to the league. And this was a fitting choice as Springfield has a long history of successful men's baseball agents. So here's the team in 1948. Their logo, as you see, is listed at the top. Now, when you look at the emblem on their uniforms, it has it's a circle, and there's a bust of Abraham Lincoln to the side, and it says Springfield Sallies around the edge. What would be really cool is if someone had a jersey, sorry, not a jersey, a shirt or even a uniform from the Sallies. It would be so wonderful to see because in all the research that I was able to do, they didn't tell you the colors of the team. So it was really interesting to learn about the uniforms themselves, and it would be really neat to see one here in Illinois. So if you have one, make sure to take a picture and send it our way because we'd love to see it. Now, the Springfield Sallies in 1948 was started, and now the leagues here, it made complete sense to have a team here in Springfield, Illinois, because it was the state capital, still is. And the city was represented by a Central League in 1889. Now, this was the men's league, it wasn't the women's. In the Western Association in 1895 was the earliest league. There was one in 1900 for the Central League, the Mississippi League in 1933, and in 1904, the city hosted a game between the Blondes and the Brunettes, which was the first game which fans paid attention and attended, and women players were played. Now, here are some of those were some of the early women's teams that were in Springfield. They were not recognized by the All-American just yet. The league was a successful business, and it could have offered the city an opportunity to build on its long history of baseball first and provide additional business opportunities for its citizens. And that's why the Sallies was started yet again. In 1948, the team statistics were 41 wins and 84 losses. And if you go to the website, you would get a chance to see all the team members. And so I'll show you a few of them here. So the Sallies started in 1948, and they had around, I want to say, almost 20 team members, including the chaperones and the coaches. And these are just some of the women who participated in the team. Now, this is the 1948 team, and they would travel around playing around 108 games for the whole season. And the Sallies never really made it to the championships. They weren't as good as that, but they did rotate quite a bit. And so some of these women would play on the Sallies in 1948, but then they would transfer to a new team in the next season. And so a lot of these women rotated from one team to the next. And so it's interesting to see what teams they ended up playing on. If you go to the website for the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, you can click on all the different baseball cards of these women, and you get a chance to see what position they played, and what they were known for, but also if they changed teams in different seasons, you'll get an opportunity to see which teams they transferred to. Also, it's important to note that all the women did not come strictly from Springfield. They came from all over, and the coaches that were chosen either had a history of playing baseball or had a minor league position as well. A lot of the Sallies were rookies and have played on other teams before. There were a few of them were brand new. So it's interesting to see the mix and mingle of these women, and a lot of them didn't really care what team they were on. They just were happy to play baseball and play it together. And also keep in mind, there was women's softball, but this was hard baseball. Now we're getting into the Sallies from 1949. The Sallies were part of the league's innovation to recruit new players. Two teams of rookies would travel together over much of the eastern half of the United States, playing exhibitions against each other. The rookie teams, which was the Springfield Sallies and the Chicago Colleens, made up one of the tours. The tour gave these new recruits an opportunity to play and also gave the league an opportunity to develop new players and let cities all across America know about the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League and showcase that women were playing baseball in America. Now, eventually the tour ended in 1950, but this team, you would see some familiar faces. Now, if you get a chance to go to the website again, you can, they have the website broken up into 3 collections. So when you click on a collection for 1948, you get an opportunity to see the whole roster for the team. And then if you go back to the main Sally's page, you'll be able to go and look at the 1949 team and the 1950 team. The overall description of the Sallies is on the main page as well. But what's interesting to note is there are some women that are listed here that only have their obituaries listed. Some of them didn't get an opportunity to actually share their story. But there was one that did stand out, and that is Glenna Sue Kidd. And if you look at the top line of images, she's the third one from the left. And so in reading her story in one of the interviews that was done, this is what we were able to tell from hers. Sue's baseball ability changed her life forever when 2 All-American Girl Professional Baseball League touring teams, the Colleens and the Sallies, arrived in Little Rock in June of 1949 to play a pair of exhibition games. Doc Williams, the owner of the Greenbriers Baseball School, got word to Marvin Kidd that his daughter should go to Little Rock for a tryout. The Kidd family arrived, and Sue, then 15, tried out before the game. She made it. The family saw the game, and they drove home so Choctaw's favorite daughter could join the tour the next day. Big and strong, but socially awkward, the 5'8" right-hander with the hard fastball and the assortment of breaking balls learned proper behavior around teammates, as well as how to get her hair done and buy clothes, making lifelong friends like Wimp Bermendinger and Fran Jansen. Not only did Sue pitch a no-hitter and prove herself worthy of the league, but at home on September 12th, the teenager pitched her father's team to an overall victory over the all-male Heber Springs All-Stars, a feat that became part of local legend. So we have Sallies from all over who came to Springfield, became a part of the Springfield Sallies team, and were able to achieve their dreams of playing professional baseball. In addition to that, they were able to prove that they were women who could still have their femininity, but also be able to play what was considered a man's sport. Now, as we move on into the 1950s, the Sallies continued. As we know, after the 1950s, the Sallies stopped touring. But there were some interesting stories that came out of the Sallies and what they were able to accomplish during the 1950s. Now, one story I'm going to try to share to you is one of an interview, and it is an interview that was done by the digital collections at Grand Valley State University. And it is an interview of Mary Moore and how she got started with the All-American League. So I'm going to bring this video up and share it with you. Okay.
Girls teams and girls sports. So how did you wind up hooking up with the All-Americans?
All right. So that is just one example of the individuals who ended up working with the Springfield Sallies as a team. Now, I did get a note from somebody stating that they couldn't hear the audio, so I will make sure to have a link to that particular video in the comments because her story is pretty interesting on how she was able to find a way to learn about the All American League and eventually end up in the All American League and the Springfield Sallies. Mary Moore is no longer living, but her family is still around. And we were very fortunate to have an interview with her through this particular digital archives. So if you get an opportunity to hear what she has to say, she ends up telling quite a bit of interesting history there. And she also goes on to talk about the uniform itself and how she was able to obtain it. Since we weren't able to really listen to the video, I'll also include the second one that I added. So there was another lady by the name of Jackie Bumgart, who also she went as Jackie. And she ended up playing for the Springfield Sallies in 1950. And she ends up recalling how she got her uniform. But was also really neat about her interview is the fact that she was able to tell us quite a bit about the emblem and also how the Sallies was listed on her baseball card. She stated that the Springfield Sallies name wasn't on her card. It was actually Springfield, Illinois that was listed. And I put her interview within the comments that you see here. Now, as you look through the roster, one of the very interesting women that ends up sharing her story is Agnes Alley. So Agnes Alley Allen, a lot of A's in her name. So she was right-handed. Her batting hand was right. And so you can see Agnes up. She's the first picture in the upper left-hand corner. She was born in Iowa, but she ended up making the roster for the Springfield Sallies in 1950. The Sallies, along with the Chicago Colleens, were referred to as the traveling team, as I stated earlier, or the rookie teams. These teams ended up playing against each other in Illinois and throughout the South and the East. The purpose of these teams was threefold: to develop the talent of players who were on the cusp of being ready for the main league, but also to generate interest in the league itself. And it was a way for them to scout for new recruits. She ended up stating that, quote, "We'd play in one city, stay overnight, and travel for the next city. To pass the time on long bus rides, we would sing, talk, and get along for the most part." She did state that her roommates were Bobby Liebrich and Pat Behringer, and they were the chaperone/managers for the two teams. So Jackie had a very interesting time with the Sallies as well. Now, she was pretty interesting. Now, I stated earlier that we don't have Jackie's information, but Jackie, let me see if she's up here. I think she might be on the next one. So Jackie did an oral history with the same group that did Mary's. She ended up stating in her history that, quote, "I fell in love with the round ball when I was just able to walk. It was a gift. It was my salvation." Her mom wasn't always very supportive. She ended up recalling that her mother's take on ball playing was that she didn't like it at all. And she could not understand why her little girl found every moment she could to play baseball with the boys. She stated that she remembered one time when her mother sent her to the store, and on the way, she went by some boys playing a scrub game. joined them, and 2 hours late getting back home. She was even late for supper, and she ended up being punished. Jackie was 5'5", 100 pounds, and she was a catcher assigned to the Sallies in 1950. And she eventually ended up playing for the Chicago Colleens. Now, both Colleens and the Springfield Sallies were managed by Mitch Scoopton, but they had the chaperone by the name of Barbara, as I mentioned earlier, and Pat. Now, even though Jackie and the Sallies didn't play in the actual league when she was there, they did participate in the summer tour, and she said it was unforgettable. Now, the first Barnstorming Sallies and Colleens played in 65 cities, 25 states, both in the South, East, and in Canada. And they were used to create excitement for the Women's Baseball League. Now, she ended up stating, "The tour was just marvelous. I had never been anywhere." So this was the first time Jackie was able to get out and see the world outside of her town. Joe McLaughlin, Jackie's catch coach, stated that with the Sallies, that she had a really good arm, and she pounced on a blunt in front of the plate. And there was one night that she whistled the ball to first base. However, Jackie encountered some downsides, including trying to fathom the enforcement of segregation laws in the South. In addition, the 90 games over the 3-month road trip were grueling, with sweltering ballparks and muggy buses in which Jackie had great difficulty sleeping. She played in 48 games, batting even a .200 with four doubles and 18 RBIs. Jackie finally recalled playing in the major league ballparks like New York's Yankee Stadium and Washington's Griffith Stadium, meeting fellow catcher and future Hall of Fame Yogi Berra, and that was one of her most memorable experiences. He actually offered Jackie his bat, which she politely declined because it was so heavy. Thinking about it now, after knowing how famous Yogi Berra was, I wish she would have kept the bat. Another person who had an amazing experience with the Sallies was Nancy Cato. Her nickname was Mudge. She was stationed at second base. She was right-handed when she threw. She also was right-handed when she went up to bat. She ended up saying, quote, "It's something she had never talked about before the movie came out, A League of Their Own." And her daughter didn't really know why. According to her daughter, she was totally thrilled about the movie for the recognition it gave to women's sports. And she stated that they talked about it a lot afterwards. And it was nice to see the kid in her, and that she was the one Madonna was playing, which I thought was really cool, that they were able to pinpoint the actors that portrayed them in the movies. But also what's really neat is in A League of Their Own, you also have some of the original players in the background. Now, in researching the Sallies, there are so many amazing stories that I could really do just one episode on just talking about each player's experience and their travel throughout the season. But in looking through all the different cards and the different players, one thing resonates throughout all these women's stories is the fact that they were finally able to play a sport that they loved. They were able to get paid for it because some of these ladies came from families that didn't have enough money for all the children in their family. In addition to that, a lot of these women were able to go on and become PE teachers, softball coaches. There was one woman who ended up playing basketball. And it's just amazing to see how a game that was designed and shown as a male sport, these women were able to make it their own. And don't only you don't only see that in A League of Their Own, but you also see it in the amazing interviews that were done with these players, expressing the enjoyment they had from traveling with being with other women who had the same passion that they had for the sport, but also their eyes being open to the world around them. So it's very interesting to see their experiences and why it's important to collect oral histories. Without these interviews, all those stories would have been lost. And it allows us to kind of have a window into the lives of these women and the experiences that they had. So they stated earlier, throughout my research, I was able to use the Sangamon link, the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League website to discover some of the histories of the Sallies, but also the history of the league itself. In addition to that, the website actually gives a list of resources on where they get a lot of their source materials. And if you're interested in learning more about the collection of the All-American Girl Professional Baseball League, you can go to the History Museum in South Bend, Indiana, which is the repository for all things the AAGPBL. So if you're interested in that particular collection, there's that. In addition to that, highly recommend that you look into the Grand Valley State University digital collections. They have a large collection of interviews of these women telling their story about their time in the Professional Baseball League. So as we go through, we were able to learn quite a bit about some women who were involved in athletics here in Central Illinois. This only is a tip of the iceberg for athletes here in Central Illinois. As you dive into local records, newspaper accounts, you can see women's teams opening up in schools and them going to state championships. In addition to that, we have some major Olympians from Central Illinois area. A lot of them went to school with some of us. In addition to that, there were some female athletes that participated in the Tokyo Olympics as well, such as rugby players, track and field, and soccer and volleyball. Now, these are individuals who actually were born here in Central Illinois and were able to branch out and do more in their sport. In addition to that, there are so many students from throughout the country that come to the University of Illinois at Springfield, Chicago, Champaign-Urbana, and they come to play their sport as well. And if you're interested in learning more about the U of I athletics, there are some amazing websites that we can direct you to as well. But a lot of those athletes have gone on to be famous sports athletes within their field and became very good at their athletic ability within a variety of different athletics. But the main thing with the Sallies and with women's golf and the YWCA, we see that women are capable of doing so much in the athletic field. And it also showcases how women are able to still have that femininity, but then also be able to dive into a sport that may be viewed as a masculine athletic team and still be able to play at a high caliber. So it's amazing to see these women and hear their stories. But what we want to hear next are stories from you. What sports did you play as a young child? And what was it like to be on an amazing team here in Central Illinois? We have a number of high school competition teams that have gone to play in championships and be able to succeed. And we want to hear those stories from you as well. So if you're interested in learning more, feel free to go to the sites that I mentioned earlier. But also, I encourage you to reach out and share your Sangamon experience and let us know what you think about sports here in Central Illinois. Tune in next week when we talk about 4-H in Central Illinois and the impact that 4-H has made on the women within Central Illinois. But also, we'll be focusing on a very important lady by the name of Geraldine McGuire from Scott County, Illinois, who made a huge impact on the young men and women that came into her life and the impact that their 4-H group had on their community. So tune in next Wednesday at 6 o'clock, where we tell the life of Geraldine McGuire and the amazing accomplishments that she has with her 4-H group in Scott County. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.